think this is about?
Well, to me, the right word is about looking at the meaning of the right word, i.e. The first word that causes controversy is using terrorist, and it's as if the poet is analysing that particular word, and basically she's implying that we as a society are being too judgmental, are being by placing a particular word on a person, we can cause conflict.
Mm. Do you think it's just, I mean, obviously she takes this idea of the terrorist or the freedom fighter, the hostile militant, the martyr and then the child. Do you think it's just about this idea of how we judge terrorists, or do you think it's about how we can see it in the sense of how we judge other people, just in general, and the labels we apply?
Yeah, I think by labelling people, you are defining that person, and maybe she's suggesting that no one should label anyone. You should see that person for who they are, rather than being judgmental. You should be more open-minded.
The different aspects of that person.
That's right, yeah.
I think as well, it's kind of suggesting that not only do we judge people, but one particular person might have a view of themselves and three other people might have three different views, so everybody's got these different views about what one person might be.
And also because if you judge someone by giving them a label as such, then it can have negative connotations, and therefore it can cause conflict in society, and rather than bringing the society together, you bring a society becomes very fragmented because of that.
So it's about prejudice, you know, prejudging somebody just based on a first impression. And it's interesting that the first impression is that of a terrorist, and this is, you know, so much of this is a debate in society today, and maybe we do need a little bit more tolerance.
Well, also as well, associated with the word terrorist, she uses a very strong verb, and the second line, lurking, again, that's got negative connotations as well. So that links into the idea of this person being a threat to us. And then she breaks this down, where she gives us ideas about a guerrilla warrior, a martyr, etc. And again, this label can cause problems for society if we continue to do this.
Okay, so let's have a look at some of the language that's in the poem. I mean, I think that it's really interesting that for each of these words that she uses, there's a verb that sort of adds to the kind of connotation or the meaning. So obviously we've got the terrorist who is lurking in the shadows, which is obviously really suspicious. But then the freedom fighter takes shelter. So you've got the verb, you know, the verb taking in and shelter, suggesting that it's not as suspicious, it's not as hostile. What else how else does she do that?
She uses a lot of exclusion words, where she starts off with outside, which is used quite a lot in each of the stanzas, stanza 1, stanza 2, 3, 5, 7. By using these particular words, where you're naming individuals, again, you are excluding them from society.
And it's interesting the way that she uses outside and repeats it throughout. She goes, outside the door, there's the terrorist. Outside that door, the freedom fighter. Almost like there's a sort of difference there. And certainly later on she talks about outside your door. And then makes it much more personal and, you know, much more hard-hitting, I suppose, for the reader.
Sort of drawing it more into from being this abstract door to being something that you know.
So it's almost like, well, you are the person that judges and tries to find the right word. And then at the end it's outside my door, isn't it? And it's interesting that it changes to the child when she says outside my door. Almost like it's become less threatening because she started to look more closely.
Yeah, also by using second person pronoun in stanza 7, she refers to us as well as a reader, where she uses your son. So it's becoming more personal, it's becoming, rather than detached, basically, we are part of what's going on in this society, and therefore we need to wake up and do something about it. And by referring to in the stanzas, it's less threatening, these words. So she's saying that we are using these words without really thinking about them. So we're using them in a sense that we're not thinking about what we are saying, we're using them quite
harshly.
Harshly, yeah.
And it's interesting that this person is in the shadows. Why do we think it's important that they are in the shadows? What does that sort of connote within the poem?
Well, they're unknown, and perhaps her sort of confusion about what's going on. She's in the dark about the situation and who this person really is.
And I suppose if they're in the shadows, you can't get the full picture because you can't actually see the truth. It's like concealed.
And also as well, we don't know why they are fighting for a particular cause, and we only know maybe part of the story. So there might be more to it, why they behave the way they do, and therefore we need to stand back and look at the whole picture rather than maybe just part of the picture.
Certainly that's the idea of the martyr. They are fighting for a cause that is really important to them, and it's not something trivial or throwaway. It's a life and death sort of situation, because the martyr is prepared to die for their beliefs. I think that question she asks in the fourth stanza is brilliant, just in terms of the metaphor. Are words no more than wavering flags? Obviously there's a link there to the poem Flag, because that's what John Agard is challenging. But this idea that we use words, but they have no substance, and that they are changeable and never the same. What other lines do we think really grab us or stand out to us in the poem?
The last stanza on the take us off his shoes, it shows that if we become more understanding to people who can understand them better, rather than judging them, maybe we would have a more of an understanding relationship with that person. And if we show them respect, in turn they will show us respect, because it does say he takes off his shoes. It's showing a sign of respect for that particular culture at that time.
Okay, so if we talk about the structure now, at the beginning of the poem, it's this kind of searching element. It's all about searching, and it kind of moves through the poem from going from searching with things like, is that the wrong description? I haven't got this right. And moves to the middle where she's almost giving up trying to find an answer. No words can help me now, so she's given up perhaps on this idea of labelling that she'd been continuing at the beginning of the poem. To then find out actually who was at the door.
I like that sort of the honesty that she is able to sort of step away from the poetic side of it and then ask the questions, and I think that's quite powerful in the poem, because very often we don't question ourselves enough and question our prejudices, but Imtiaz Dharker shows real sort of courage in being prepared to admit that she might be wrong.
And also honesty as well, because this idea runs right through the poem, where she's not quite sure what she should call these particular people. And there's a sense of doubt, but she also makes us doubt as well. So therefore she's educating the reader for us to be more understanding, to look outside of ourselves before we make these judgments about people.
Well, it's quite a regular poem in many respects, isn't it? It's got quite a definite structure and pattern to it. What are some of the things that we've noted about that kind of regularity?
Well, she makes a point at the beginning about being outside the door, and then she maybe starts questioning herself, or she's adding extra information about this person's taking shelter. Then she uses the three-line structure again, and then she develops it even more. So she might be asking a question and possibly answering it, and trying to sort of get to an answer of what this person is, what these people are.
I mean, I think there's a neatness to the poem which perhaps sort of contradicts the neatness that she is looking for in language. So if we look at stanza 1, and this is a pattern that's repeated in other stanzas, we've got sort of a location outside the door, or outside waiting in the shadows. And then you've got the next line is about what this person is doing, so you've got the verb of lurking. And then you have the label that she chooses to apply. So it's almost like the poem is trying to have some neatness to it, but then she keeps disrupting that by putting in the questions or the doubting statements. So it doesn't have a three-line stanza structure because of her confusion, kind of mixes things up, and that's quite, I think, quite helpful in the poem.
It adds to her train of thought as well, because she's she's not quite sure, so maybe she's using the three-line structure and then changing it again because her mind's changing all the time, her ideas of what this right word is to describe these people, because she doesn't come to a correct definition.
Yeah, it's almost a stream of consciousness poem,
Yeah.
isn't it? It's that sort of, you know, as these thoughts are going through her head.
And therefore, again, we are educated about maybe questioning ourselves before we prejudge people.
Do you think that's what she's trying to do, to educate the reader, or at least...
Definitely educate the reader and be more open-minded about what's going on in society before you start judging someone as a terrorist or giving them a particular name. Understand why they behave the way they do.
In terms of comparing this poem to other poems, I would have compared it to At the Border in terms of the fact that there's different views coming across in both poems. In At the Border there's different views between the children and the adults in that situation, and then in The Right Word, the different views that people have about a particular person or a particular group of people.
I think that's a really interesting comparison to make. If I was going to compare The Right Word to a poem, I think I'd pick The Yellow Palm. They're both, I suppose, first-person accounts. He's walking down Palestine Street in Baghdad, and he sees lots of things that on the surface appear, you know, quite normal and quite ordinary that you might expect to see, but beneath those there's some sort of hidden truth. Unfortunately, in The Yellow Palm, it's usually a darker truth. So he talks about hearing the call to prayer at the Golden Mosque, but then seeing blood on the walls and the muezzin's eyes being wild with despair. So I think that they work quite well together in terms of seeing truth.
I would compare the Right Word with the flag, in the sense that the flag relates to certain people. It has a patriotic beliefs, and therefore, in that case, it means a lot to people, and they will do certain things in order to fight for what they believe in. And patriotic, he challenges that, and therefore, in the same sense, in The Right Word, Dharker is challenging how certain people should be labelled by using a specific word. And again, what's that fluttering in the breeze? A flag, well, like in the poem, The Right Word, there's also that same idea as well.
Yes.
About words fluttering, waving flags. Again, you can make that comparison where you associate a particular word with a particular place, maybe a particular person from a certain area, and that link can be made between those two poems. In that people have got ideas about someone before they even get to know that person. They judge them by where they're from.